I'm Louisa Barton for the Horse Talk Show. We are doing a series called At Home with the Parellis. We're here with Linda and Pat Parelli at their farm in Ocala, the horse capital. We've been chatting to Linda about her childhood and kind of growing up with the ponies and Gymkhana and her life in Singapore and Australia. Going to switch it over now. Going to give the microphone to Pat Parelli and let him tell us a little bit about what Pat was like as a little boy. Pat, give us a rundown on the childhood.
Okay. Well, I remember one time somebody asked, one of my aunts said, "Are you a little brat?" And I said, "No, I'm a big brat." So I was always destined to be something big. But no, I was fortunate. I was raised in the East Bay area, and believe it or not, there were horses everywhere. People had them in their backyard. When I was 3 years old, my father had worked at a plant called AB&I that was a plastic pipe company and had 40 acres around it. And since he was the manager, he got to use it for cattle and horses or whatever he wanted. And he didn't know anything about horses, but my dad was a boxer. His boxing manager was a cowboy. And so I was the son he never had. So I had horses since I was 3 years old. And the first English saddle I ever saw was when we were in 4-H and we went over to the Cow Palace, and they had the Grand Nationals, and they had then different gaited horses and jumping and all kinds of English classes. And I had never seen an English saddle in all my life, other than on TV, because you saw Walt Disney, you saw My Friend Flicker, or the Horse with the Flying Tail, or some of those kind of things. But growing up on the West Coast, everything was about cowboys, and of course it was all cowboy movies, and Western movies and television shows and that sort of thing. So I was really lucky just to have horses then. I grew up in 4-H and FFA, and all of my friends, most of my friends, their families had ranches. And when I say a ranch in the Bay Area, I mean 10,000 acre ranches, 26,000 acre ranches in the East Bay Area, east of San Francisco. And people don't realize that when you drive through there on Highway 101 or any of the 680 or any of the freeways that go through there, all those hills, they're full of cattle. They're ranches, and people don't realize there's millions of acres. So just with that, I got into junior rodeo. And when I went to the Cow Palace every year as a 4-H'er, then in FFA.
The Cow Palace?
The Cow Palace in San Francisco. That's the name of it. That's where the Grand Nationals were. There used to be Madison Square Gardens, Boston Gardens, then the Denver Stock Show. It started everything off was the Denver Stock Show. But all the big shows, all the finals, and people came from the East Coast out to the Cow Palace for the Grand Nationals. The Cow Palace is a huge coliseum where the Beatles played and where all these big things, if it's not something you're familiar with, or a lot of people today are familiar with, and the way it would work is they would have a rodeo event, then have a horse show event, then a rodeo event, and a horse show event, and it's 2 weeks long. And it would start off with all the English, all the gaited horses and stuff like that at the first week, and then the second week was all the Western horses. So I really got to see every kind of horse. Hackney ponies, I got to see, Tennessee Walkers, I got to see Missouri Foxtrotters, I got to see, all these different kinds of horses, plus all the Western events and the rodeo events. And of course, I was crazy, like all the kids I grew up with about rodeo, and wanted to ride and rope and do all that kind of stuff. We called it the 3 R's: riding, roping, and remembering. And I started going to junior rodeos, getting on steers and then cows and then a few bulls and stuff. Then I tried my hand at bareback riding, and I was my first one I got on, I did good enough that this man named Johnny Hawkins, who was the 63 world champion, took me under his wing and went to his school, and bronc riding school, and I was the Rookie of the Year in 1972. And I've ridden in over 3,000 horses in 3,000 different rodeos. Or 3,000 horses in rodeos, and then all the practice horses. I used to practice 10 bucking horses a week just to get ready. So I had a 14-year career, professional career in rodeo, and rode at all the big rodeos: Cheyenne, Cow Palace. I rode at Madison Square Gardens, rode at Fort Worth, rode at all the big rodeos, Calgary. Anyway, on and on and on and on, and all the little ones too. All right, and mostly on the West Coast, kind of west of the Rockies. But when I was rodeoing, I would pay attention to the specialty acts. They would have trained dogs. They'd have donkeys and pigs and horses and all these different acts with all these animals. So I started going over and studying, how did you get, that animal to do that? And they started sharing with me. So I've always been fascinated in animal training. And I've been fortunate enough to study with circus trainers, and all just all kinds of stuff like this. And so it wasn't just horses, it was animals. And a lot of people, when they come here, they're actually quite amazed at what my dogs do and all the different things that we do here. And I even train cows here, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. I tell everybody we train the cows to want to go where we want them to go. Okay, instead of just making them go.
Do they get it as fast as the horses?
Oh, they get it really quick, as long as you're taking them somewhere nice. So anyway, it's a fun thing to train animals. And so then luckily I ran into a man named Mr. Troy Henry. I believe it was about 1975 or 6, probably 6. And he was the best Western horseman on the West Coast. And here's how I met him. I was sitting on a couch like this next to a friend, and this guy, television come on a commercial, and this guy comes riding a horse and does a 75-foot long slide with, like he had feathers in his hands, just lifting the reins barely. And I went, oh my God, who was that? And the guy says, that's Troy Henry. I said, who's that? And he goes, that's the best horseman on the West Coast. And I go, man, I would love to meet him. Well, my uncle's a shoer. He says, I'll introduce you. So I got the introduction, and he took me under his wing for 5 years. And he passed away in 1981, and I was with him at the time. And about 3 months later, a veterinarian from Southern California in Hollywood asked me to come down and do a seminar on what I'd learned in that 5 years with Mr. Henry. I was like, oh my gosh, I was thinking all the techniques and all the things. It turned out it was a philosophy what I learned. I learned that horsemanship was a natural phenomenon. I learned that there were 8 principles to real horsemanship, not to make assumptions, that communication is 2 or more individuals sharing and understanding an idea, that there's mutual responsibilities in the partnership, but the leader has to use the attitude of justice to show boundaries. We had to know that body language is the universal language. We had to learn that horses teach riders and riders teach horses. He put me on horses that knew how to do lead changes, knew how to spin, knew how to slide, how to work a cow. I was just a cowboy trying to figure it all out on myself. And he said, you're the blind leading the blind. And then finally, when I learned all that, principle number 8, principles, purpose, and time are the tools of teaching. And that skeleton is what I've been sharing since 1982, which was my first seminar, March 1st, 1982. So from there, this philosophy is built into a concept, and then there's theory. And this is theory backed up by science. Dr. Miller, a lot of people might know him for full imprinting. We were invited. Well, first of all, I think at the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles, we were the official equine psychologists of that. And then we got invited to Paris one time together to speak at a equine ethology seminar, which was all these behavioral scientists got together. Equine ethology is the science of studying the natural herd behavior of horses. There's the dominant mare, the alpha mare, and how this all works and all that sort of thing. So horse psychology is what has really been interesting for me, but also human psychology. How do you help somebody be the best me they can be? How can I help people? I feel like my real job is I'm a success coach. I'm a horseologist, which means I study horse behavior, but I'm a success coach for humans to help them to reach their potential. And whether they're wanting to be athletes or I have people that sometimes are just new with horses and are even getting over fears of horses and all kinds. So there's only 2 kinds of people in the world: horse lovers and the other kind. And I'm here to help anybody who loves horses, and I'm here to help them learn how horses feel, think, act, and play.
That's amazing. Wonderful. Did you ever imagine, one last question, did you ever imagine this is what you'd end up doing when you were a kid?
No, but I'm not surprised. Because my dad was a 2-time Golden Glove champion of New York, all-service champion 2 years in a row, and second in the world 1954. And he was not going to raise anybody that wasn't going to be big. As big as his... Be big. Big as... Wear big pants.
Bigger than a big brat. Pat and Linda Parelli at their farm in Ocala. I'm Louisa Barton for the Horse Talk Show.